I'm home.
Throws to the near side, and that's intercepted. Intercepted by Jack Jones, heading down the near sideline, and this will be a pick six for Jack Jones and a touchdown for Arizona State.
People here, when you think of Sun Devil football, you think of Sun Devil for life.
Here we go, 7 seconds. Bercovici, he's just going to air it out deep downfield, and no white shirts around. Oh, Jalen Strong! Caught for a touchdown! Jalen Strong makes the catch!
I went to Arizona State. Right. I'm a Sun Devil, man.
This is about the Valley. We need the Valley. If we get the Valley all in, the sky is the limit.
Welcome to Speak of the Devils, the premier podcast for Sun Devil football. I'm Brad Denny with 3TV.
And I'm Joe Healey with DevilsDigest.com.
Well, Joe, that was a disaster of literal historic proportions.
Yeah, that was bad. Didn't have really high expectations. It's tough to play at Utah. Very incredibly well-coached team. A good team this year, but I don't think anybody under the sun would have foreseen a 55-3 tail whipping. Now, obviously, certainly doesn't help when you lose your starting quarterback just a few plays into the game. But the whole body of work was an absolute mess, as that game could not end soon enough, as ASU now tries to turn the page and look ahead to a matchup at UCLA that has some similarities to that ball game last weekend in Salt Lake.
Yeah, so while we will spend some time as to breaking down what did happen, we also will be following that example and turning the page and looking ahead for the ASU game against UCLA and kind of the final stages of this 2023 season. A lot of things happen, and of course some off-field things to break down as well. We'll also be talking to ASU running back Kyson Brown about his freshman season, and he's become a contributor for the Sun Devil offense week in and week out, as well as wide receiver Jordyn Tyson, who made his first game action against Utah in that blowout loss, had a target, but he's obviously an explosive weapon from his last season at Colorado, coming back from that ACL injury, so had a chance to catch up with him. And also, then a little bit later on, we're going to be going behind Bruin lines to get a look at UCLA from Carlos, a.k.a. Equity Bruin of the No Truck Stops podcast. Joe, but before we dive into all that, some news items to break down.
Absolutely, and before we get into that news, after a huge loss like that, you just got to flush everything, got to get rid of everything, you got to start everything new, whether it's your clothing, whether it's maybe, TV's a bad luck, even your vehicle, right? So if you need a new vehicle, and I know that you do, hit up Jones Auto Group, which, of course, has been servicing the state of Arizona and the Sun Devil community for more than 50 years. With multiple locations across the state, they are as strong as it gets when it comes to their support of Sun Devil athletics and the ASU community. You already know by now, each year since NIL came into play in college sports, Jones Auto Group has been on top of that for ASU, including 4 players from this 2023 squad that are driving some sweet rides, courtesy Jones Auto Group, and it is your support of them that allows them and enables them to play such a critical role in ASU's NIL strategy. At Jones Auto Group, the Sun Devil community is truly treated like family. If you're concerned about any issues standing in the way of driving the vehicle of your dreams, credit issues, whatever it may be, contact Jones Auto Group. I'll give you their contact information here in a second. They will outline every possible winning game plan option just for you. And as we always tell you, tax advantages. Jones Auto Group can help you with that. You might be able to save tax money that you'd otherwise spend on a new vehicle. That adds up. You want to work with a fellow Sun Devil when you're looking into something as significant as buying a new vehicle. So hit up Parker Jones, our guy, not just the owner and GM, but a third-generation Arizona State alum, and just like you, a die-hard Sun Devil fan. Here is his cell number. I tell you every week, until all of you have it saved in your phone, I'm going to be talking about it. So here's his number, Parker Jones, 602-881-8998. Again, 602-881-8998. That's his cell phone, not just an office phone. Text him, call him. He wants to hear from you. You can also browse in their online inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles at jonesautocenters.com. Jones Auto Group, Arizona's best since 1970.
All right, so ASU's final road game of the season is this week at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. And then they'll return home on the 18th to face Oregon, obviously a game that has got a lot of intriguing storylines there. And so for all those folks who are heading out there to Tempe to attend the game, this is where we tell you the game time if we knew it, but the Pac-12 decided to put that on a 6-day hold, kind of the dreaded thing. They actually had 3 games on the dreaded 6-day hold, and if that's bad enough, looking at the Big 12 slate, they had all but one game on the 6-day hold, so that's annoying for all involved.
Yeah, and that's tough, and even from fan perspective, media perspective, but for folks who might be traveling, that sort of thing. I mean, that kind of window is pretty wild, and the possibilities are seemingly endless. It's not like it's either going to be like 5, 6, or 7 or something like that where it's in this tight window. You've got something like a 9-hour window, right? Like 11 noon up to 8 p.m. Everything in between. So you got to kind of roll with the punches. But yeah, it is pretty wild that sort of thing can't be sorted out quicker than less than a week before the game.
All right, so now to some more important matters. Offensive lineman, starting left tackle, and a player that was at or near the top of both Joe and mine 10 most important players list heading into the season. Isaiah Glass has left the team, signaling his intention to take a red shirt this year and enter the transfer portal to play his final 2 seasons. Now this, of course, is pretty interesting. So he started the season this year, his second as the starting left tackle. Had an up-and-down camp after having kind of an up-and-down 2022 season, trying to fight off Bram Walden, kind of rotated with him a little bit. Got injured in the second game of the season, missed a few games, came back last week against Wazoo. The offensive line played pretty well. He took the first team reps on last Tuesday and Wednesday in practice that was available for us in the media to watch, and then came out that he did not make the trip on Friday. And that, as Kenny Dillingham kind of alluded to, or said, that left guard and true freshman Sean Na'a learned that he was going to kick out the tackle on the plane to Salt Lake City to face this very talented and disruptive Utah defensive front. Not ideal, obviously. We'll dive into the struggles ASU's offense had. But and then right after that, Glass posted on social media that he is signaling his intent that his days as a Sun Devil are over.
Really curious situation, especially when you factor in the injury matters and drawing things out over the course of, the season to date so far. I get that it's a part of college football, but, the whole, strategically play a small handful of games so you can redshirt and book it out of town is something that still, is a tough pill to swallow. It's tough when it's a local player. It's tough when it is a Sun Devil legacy. Now, the facts are what they are, and this is not me saying anything of opinion. This is just what has been reported and shared from other entities. You have an organization like Pro Football Focus that has him ranked as one of the poorest Power 5 offensive linemen in the country. That's not an opinion. That's not a sour grapes thing I'm saying because the guy's leaving the program. It is what it is. So it is frustrating and unfortunate to lose someone who has game experience and is, again, a local player and a legacy. But when you're talking about the caliber of performance, is that going to be difficult to replace or even exceed? Potentially not. We all know that offensive line is going to be way atop the chart of the wish list for the transfer portal, and this just adds to that. So, again, it's that new normal in college sports that you don't want to get too terribly emotional in your reaction to it, but it just is such a far cry from what we've known for decades that it still kind of sticks in you a little bit.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, as you mentioned, that you had the legacy aspect, a local guy, but he was a kind of a holdover from the prior regime, and this coaching staff brought in their guy, Bram Walden, another local guy, played at Saguaro, 4-star, and I believe he was pressed into starting duty. Had a terrific game against Cal. Is one of the, I believe, the best or one of the best rated offensive linemen in terms of pass protection that week. So a lot of upside there. Unfortunately, Walden continues to be injured, and so hopefully he can get back and salvage some games here at the end of the season. But yeah, just kind of the results where they were what they were, and I think we put Glass near the top of our important list because holding down that left tackle spot by nature, you're going to be asked to play a key role, but you just wanted to see more from than what you saw last year. Kind of, at times he rotated with Emmett Boley, at left tackle last year, and then was rotating with Walden. So never really got that firm grasp on the job, and just especially at a situation where, if this was something that was an idea that was in his head, and by all means, if you want to transfer and explore his options elsewhere, by all means. But to do it after taking some first team reps all week long and then not making the trip and then forcing that true freshman into a very unenviable situation, which we will talk maybe a little bit later on about. A lot of credit to Sean Na'a for putting forth the effort and taking that challenge head on. But just with this situation with the offensive line as it is, it's really just kind of putting that team in a bad spot.
I was hoping for Glass to be like a Evan Finkenberg or a Jamil Douglas or a Quinn Bailey. These guys that comes in and may not have massive recruiting expectations, but gets a lot of starting, a lot of playing experience, and develops into a high-level all-conference player, NFL potential, as you've seen with guys, again, on that list like Bailey and Douglas. Evan Finkenberg, one of the top offensive linemen ASU has had in the last decade or so. But you just did not see that progress. And again, that's an objective statement that would be said if he were the starting left tackle for this game against UCLA and not exiting the program. So it is unfortunate. Sometimes playing experience can kick that trajectory upward. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily do that. So we'll see what happens. And I know a lot of folks are going to be interested to see what type of program he lands at. Is he going to go somewhere that's a lateral or improved stop? That can create some challenges as well. Is he going to maybe knock down to a group of 5 or something like that? These decisions remain to be seen. But it still is something where it is a frustrating ordeal when you have people that choose to leave, especially when it's midway through the season in a role where someone, again, like you said, Brad, he was on the very short list of the most important players because of the position that he held here, and now that's gone.
Yeah, truly unfortunate. So, we'll see where he lands and, what ASU is able to do. As Kenny Dillingham said in his Monday presser, that the offensive line in the transfer portal is going to be priority A, B, C, D, and E and F as well. So, it's, wish him well. He was a Sun Devil legacy, but, you got to look forward, and you just got to kind of, as Dillingham has said often this season, no one cares about your circumstance, and so we'll see how this offensive line is going to be able to, now further depleted, going to be able to kind of weather the storm with 3 good defenses going down the remainder of the schedule. Turn into the injury front. Now, this is just probably one of the saddest things. Defensive end Michael Matus is again out for the year, tore his other ACL. Of course, missed all of last year with an ACL tear. Got injured this week on a special teams play. And just real heartbreaking. One of the best dudes to go through this program. Obviously, defensive line is an area also that you want to have a lot of viable bodies and have a good rotation. But unfortunately, Michael Matus is not going to be able to play the final games of his Sun Devil career after spending several years here and being an example for his teammates and really just kind of a good representation of Sun Devil football.
Yeah, totally heartbreaking outcome there. With all of just the chaos of this season and with so little to really play for, you wanted guys like him, those seniors, those players in their final season, to be able to at least just play through the remainder of the year, make the absolute most of it, soak up all the time with their teammates and brothers that they possibly can. And obviously the thing that you want not to happen is injury issues, especially of a severe degree like this. So wishing him all the best with that. And, it's just a absolute bummer that he's going to have to sit on the sidelines and be rehabbing for months instead of being out playing these last few games.
And he wasn't the only defensive lineman to go down. A defensive end, Prince Dorba, who's been one of the bright spots for the Sun Devil defense, really kind of being very effective out on the edge. He got injured in the game against Utah. He won't practice, as per Kenny Dillingham. Just trying to be delicate here with the media injury reporting policies here. Officially day to day, so another big loss for that defense. But as we mentioned, with B.J. Green and Clayton Smith, you do have some depth there, but some other guys behind him are going to have to step up in Dorba's absence. Yeah,
been really impressed with the full body of work from Dorba over the course of this season. He's really shown some high big time potential and putting it on the field there. So any missed action is going to hurt this defense. And, you just want to get all your key pieces in place for this final stretch of the season just to try to create some positivity in any way that you can. So if he's off the field, that's a bad thing for this defense.
And perhaps most importantly, the quarterback position already ravaged so hard with Jaden Rashada's injury, Drew Pine's injury. Trenton Bourguet went down on the third snap against Utah. He's officially day-to-day. And again, I can't really say a whole lot, but Trent's a tough guy, and at one point after leaving the game, after the initial injury, came back, played a series before leaving for good. So we'll see if he's able to battle back and make the start against UCLA this week. But yeah, just another the offensive line, and rightfully so, gets the kind of headlines for being the most hard hit by injuries. But man, the quarterback depth chart, they've already had 3 starters. 3 guys start a game so far this year, but you just hate to see the continued attrition behind center. And
that makes sense that you have issue A creating issue B. If you have a depleted offensive line to begin with when it comes to your concerns about talent, and you had injuries up front, guys like Ben Coleman, injured in the spring, and Aaron Frost, who just struggled to remain healthy, and then just the myriad physical issues that have happened on the offensive line. When you've got that going on, you're really putting your quarterbacks at risk, and ASU has seen the negative results of that scenario. So Trenton's a fighter, dude's a warrior. You get the impression, again, without having too much information to share or to know what's going on immediately, you get the impression that it's not something that's going to keep him out for a big chunk of time or the remainder of the season or anything like that. But man, if ASU has to opt for Conover or somebody else at quarterback, if you're starting 4 quarterbacks over the course of a season, I've seen a lot here, know a lot, researched a lot. That would be a little nugget of trivia that I don't know that I've ever seen or heard of at ASU or many places elsewhere, because 3 is really pushing it. 3 starting quarterbacks in one season. That's only happened a small handful of times in the 25, 30 years I've been following ASU football. So to get to 4 is just something that's from a different universe, and in itself would basically just be a summary of this season if that were to happen.
Yeah, so we will monitor the progress and see who actually takes that first snap. Some breaking recruiting news for the 2025 class. ASU has lost a commitment in Joseph Jojo Albright, a 2025 safety out of Texas, tweeted his decommitment from the program, but ASU is still in pretty good shape with in the 2024 class. Of course, the early signing day is coming up in mid-December. One notable piece of news that kind of just broke after last week's episode dropped is that ASU defensive coordinator Brian Ward was rewarded for his great stewardship of the Sun Devil defense and becoming one of the Pac-12's better units with a 3-year contract extension. Now, of course, as a lot of jaded fans pointed out during the game, is that Utah is putting up a lot of points and yards. Interesting timing, but I think from what we've seen from last year's defense to just kind of what we've seen through the first 2/3 of this season, the job that Ward has done with this defense to put forth not just a capable and attacking unit, but one that's been able to kind of weather the storm and carry the burden as this offense has struggled all year long.
Yeah, what you've seen out of him, I mean, don't have the Utah performance be what defines Brian Ward and his coaching ability. I'm confident that's an aberration, a very disgusting aberration, don't get me wrong, but the performances that we saw in consecutive weeks leading up to that game, I think that's really more the substance of what he's all about. What you saw at Washington was something very impressive, and even though some of the numbers for Washington State looked nice on paper, ASU's defense really, had a very strong effort that afternoon, early evening as well, to win that ball game. So you want to keep him around because that's the kind of guy that typically will get poached. And, I mean, the timing was perfect because there is a job opening that is long overdue in Los Angeles with Alex Grinch finally getting fired from his position at USC.
Good Lord.
And you have to wonder if ASU didn't lock – and maybe that, who knows? That could have been an influential factor. I'm not saying it's the only reason by any stretch. Obviously, you want to keep him around here for just the genuine purposes of it. But when you know that something's going on, of course, USC is not going to be in ASU's conference. But in this part of the world, USC can pay a lot of money. So that's something that maybe was on the minds of Kenny Dillingham and the powers that be that make those decisions. So, again, it's a very good thing, and we certainly hope to have this season end on a positive note for the team as a whole and that defense. But you figure with having some key players out and, the departures like a Will Schaefer or Anthony Cooper having medical issues, or Xavier Alford can't get on the field because of the friggin' NCAA. There's been adversity that this defense has faced, other injury issues as well, Trey Brown, things like that, these ins and outs of the lineup. You got to be proud with the job that he's done, and that's something that, as you rebuild this offense, if you can get a strong defense, that can help you bridge that gap fairly quickly.
All right, so switching gears a little bit to basketball, of course, the men's team tips off on Wednesday the 8th, taking on Mississippi State. The ladies got their season off on the right foot with a nice win on Monday night. But the success on the recruiting trail for Bobby Hurley, we talked about it last week when they were able to land a 4-star commitment from Amir Ali, top 100 type of player. That success continued into this week. 2 more commits, and especially kind of led off with another 4-star, Sammy Yane, a 6'7" wing forward type at a Compass Prep in Chandler, was the first to commit this week. That's a significant addition to the class. Very well-regarded player and prospect. And then today, of course, the news breaks when we commit, or when on days that we record. Another commitment, a 3-star point guard commit, 6'4", Bo Aldridge has committed as well. And those 2 commitments have now bumped ASU's 2024 recruiting class to number 16 nationally, Joe, per Rivals. That's not too shabby for Coach Hurley.
Yeah, you're seeing some different things than we've seen in the past. Number one, a lot of the names on this list have some size. Guys that are like 6'9" or taller, which is a departure from the guard U type of thing that we've seen at ASU. And as fun as that was, it's important to have size in the game of basketball. A handful of these players are local guys from some of these premier basketball schools that are the prep schools, a little bit different from the Dobson high schools in the Moon Valleys of the world, but the ones where they are sending a lot of guys to some elite college programs. So these are well-prepared players. Another thing that you're seeing, and especially with the most recent commitment, is the impact of ASU's future in the Big 12 Conference, one of the most competitive conferences for college basketball that there is. You're seeing that in the interviews, and that is a major, major factor. I mean, I know our guy Kyle Dodd, KD, last week talking about how he's riding with the Pac-12 and believes that it's as competitive as the Big 12. And I'm never going to call his prowess into doubt, but you're seeing the impact of this change and how it affects ASU's basketball recruiting, because ASU here has a top 20 class, and I know that Sun Devil basketball fans are hoping that the turnstile element of the attrition and roster turnover that's happened these last couple of years, where you're basically losing 9-10 guys and keeping 3. Hopefully that can change as time goes on. But to be able to get some of these high-profile prospects in on the board to become Sun Devils, that's a pretty dang big deal as you move on to this new era of ASU basketball in the Big 12. So, folks, if you need something to remove that horrible taste of that 52-point defeat at the hands of Utah, my goodness, it makes your stomach churn, you need to treat yourself to a meal at Spaghetti Shack, which you, of course, by now know after these few years we've been talking about them. Not just Sun Devil owned, but owned and operated by a former Sparky the Sun Devil. They've got 3 locations, one of which up there in Pine Top, 2 in Tempe, including an ASU location just about a mile from Mountain America Stadium. That one's open from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and 11 to midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. Check out their website. Check out their social media. We've been helping to promote it a little bit. You'll see that they have some very new, very exciting menu changes, a lot of options different from before. So you can get in there and you can get a number of different things, a number of different combinations with your pastas, with your sandwiches, whatever it is that you want to do. You definitely want to check that out.
I actually had their chicken parm the other day. I visited the new location.
Okay.
Really good.
There you go.
All
right.
They nailed it.
I need to mix it up. I was there once for normal purposes. I've gone with the standards, but I need to mix it up, which is always hard. You go to a restaurant and obviously everything's good, but you know what you like, so you face that moral dilemma of, do I stick with the old trusty or do I experiment? But you know what? If you want to experiment with some catering, they can help you out there. And, of course, like all our sponsors, Spaghetti Shack is deeply involved in giving back to the Sun Devil community and the Tempe community as a whole. So next time you are in the ASU area looking for some grub, support a Sun Devil small business owned and operated by diehard Sun Devils. That new ASU location is 922 East Apache Boulevard. Once again, 922 East Apache Boulevard. You can find them on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at The Spaghetti Shack, and on Twitter at Spaghetti_Shack to check out their menu, hours, locations, and more. Check them out online at thespaghettishack.com. The Spaghetti Shack, takeout for the pasta-loving people.
All right, Joe, let's spend just a few minutes on ASU's 55-3 loss to Utah. I mean, this didn't even have kind of like the interesting train wreck factor of there's some intriguing elements because this, quite simply, this is an ASU team that just got beat down in what Kenny Dillingham termed as a game of blocking and tackling, and they did neither well. And Utah just really took it to them from the first drive where Utah drove down the field on ASU's defense to the ASU's first drive where Trenton Bourguet went down with a injury, and then it just kind of compounded, and they didn't relent. I mean, they scored a touchdown with 8 seconds left, and I don't think anybody on the ASU side had any problems with that. Kenny and even Jordan Clark said, it's our job as a defense to stop them, and they didn't do that. But to me, what's really interesting is I think this was a battle of cultures, and even Kenny Dillingham said that we lost this game in March, kind of referring to just the preparation and and I think it kind of breaks down to like kind of a program that is in year zero that has obviously faced, on top of just the normal challenges of a brand new staff and roster turnover, significant roster turnover of 78 new guys. You throw all the injuries on that as well, versus a program that's in year 19 under Coach Whittingham that has had some significant injury issues of their own, but that culture is so firmly ingrained there. They are able to kind of adjust and have built up the depth, and that culture is so just permeates throughout that U program that they're able to kind of withstand. And even though that they haven't had Cam Rising all season long, or Brant Keithy, or they're playing quarterbacks and safeties at running back, they're able to withstand those losses. And you saw kind of that battle of cultures. And Kenny has been talking about how Utah's the gold standard, what he's been really trying to show and build the Sun Devil program in that image. And you just saw kind of just like the big brother versus kind of the little brother on the field on Saturday afternoon, and man, it did not go well.
There was just nothing good about this game. I mean, you're talking about 83 yards of total offense, 43 net rushing yards on 29 carries. That's 1.5 yards per carry, and 40 passing yards on 8 completions. Just really, really bad stuff. I mean, the longest run of the day was a 14-yard run by Jacob Conover. You only had one pass play that exceeded double digits, 20-yard completion to Gio Sanders. And then on the other side,
which converted their only third down of the day. I believe they were 1 for 15.
Goodness gracious. And then, on the other side for Utah, this is a talented team. It's a good team, but it's not up there objectively with some of the better teams that they've had, which are pretty dang good teams on a national scale. From the running game perspective, the Zach Moss era and the others that have been these 1,000-yard, all-conference caliber, NFL caliber runners, you really didn't have that too much on this year's squad, but they looked like it up and down the lineup. 352 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, averaging over 7 yards per carry. Jaquindon Jackson, the converted quarterback, 111 net rushing yards. Bryson Barnes didn't need to do a lot, doesn't have to run up the stats, but he threw for 161 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, only took 1 sack. So they just imposed their will on offense, which was not what you expected. I mean, it would have made sense for, or maybe a little bit more sense, I guess you could say, for this game to have been like a 21-3, 24-3, where maybe neither offense looks great, but ASU's just really in bad shape. But for ASU to surrender 55 points, Utah's capable of that, but this offense just has not been doing that for the Utes. So it is just a terrible, terrible day at the office for Sun Devil football.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Joe, 83 yards. That's the worst since 1946 and the second fewest in a game in program history. In the press box, we were having kind of just the record watch, just talking about whether this team would get to triple digits in terms of yards. And obviously, losing your quarterback on the third play of the game is not going to help your cause, and having your left tackle, as we mentioned at the top in the Eastside Glass, not make the trip, and a true freshman who's been played principally at guard his entire time here and this season, be like you going up against the likes of that defensive line that year in year out is so ferocious, and it just was a absolute disaster. I mean, we had Jacob Conover, to his credit, battled in a very difficult situation, but 5 of 22. Cameron Scattaboo was playing some quarterback and not just like the Wildcat package. He was back there running the offense as best he could. And you mentioned, Joe, even the plays that nothing went right, and even when they had glimmers of hope, Melquan Stovall had a punt return touchdown called back off for a penalty. Scattaboo hit a deep pass to Troy O'Meary for a significant gain, called back for offensive pass interference. Even the one kind of bright spot of the day, the 78-yard return by Elijah Badger on a kick return. Offense could do literally nothing with it, had to settle for the lone points of the day. But I do agree, the defense just getting manhandled in the fashion that they did was the most alarming thing, kind of jumped out. 10 runs of allowed of 10-plus yards or more. Barnes even had, I believe, a pair of 17-yarders as well. But everything was just working for the Utes. Absolutely nothing was working for the Sun Devils, and just one of those games. And even just kind of the insult to injury, or I guess injury to insult, with Michael Matus going down and Prince Dorba, Bourget, some other guys that got dinged up a little bit during that trip. It's just top to bottom had to be the worst, one of the worst days. I guess, I don't know, Joe. Is it one of the worst non-U of A losses? I mean, it's certainly the worst conference loss in ASU's history in the Pac 8, 10, 12 in the 52-point margin, but just in terms of everything being bad.
I mean, it's hard to think of another one. The only other types of games that would really qualify are just those, heartbreaking losses against a putridly bad team. Of course, everybody's going to, the first one off the list is going to be that 2014 loss to Oregon State. That was a close game. So I think there's a different category for, disappointing losses to otherwise bad teams. Of course, Utah's a very good team, but as far as just an absolute, complete manhandling in every capacity, this wasn't a game where ASU racked up some yards at the end and lost, 55-24 and made it semi-respectable. I mean, it was just a complete no contest. And just some, another set of numbers that really stands out in just such a head-shaking way is, Elijah Badger, a decent day all-purpose yardage. He had 98 all-purpose yards. But he had 1 receiving yard and 1 rushing yard and 96 kick return yards, which is very good. I mean, that just kind of sums it up when you have, probably arguably your top skill player, 3 feet of running, 3 feet of catching and running, and obviously the rest on kick returns. That just, to me, is one of those things that just kind of is symbolic of what happened on Saturday afternoon. But yeah, back to the point, back to the question. Man, it's really hard to think of a game that falls into this category of such just an absolute tail whipping. And we've seen some. We've seen some at the hands of the good Oregon teams, the good USC teams. Washington's done a number. Obviously, Utah has done a number on ASU. You think back to that 2019 game where the defense really manhandled ASU. I mean, those things just absolutely paled in comparison to what we saw on Saturday in all facets. So my concern and curiosity is what sort of lasting effect and hangover effect this is going to have on this team, because ASU certainly had some confidence after that Washington State victory. But now you've got 3 games that, might have some winnable elements to them. But what you saw on Saturday, if there's anything remotely close to that, ASU is not going to stand a chance in these last 3 games, and you got to just try to build as much positivity as you possibly can, even if it's in defeat. So it's almost like a back to the drawing board for the 10th time this year is what the Devils face after this loss.
Yeah, and I'm really curious, obviously, to see the response. But Saturday kind of felt like, I said this on the Devil's Junkie podcast, and so check out Hoder Bino's podcast everywhere you get your podcasts. as well. I joined him this week, and I just kind of felt that like there was a feeling that this was maybe kind of like the bill came due type of day for ASU in terms of they've had 4 weeks where we talked about they were getting so close to victory, USC, Cal, Colorado, and then they finally broke through against Wazoo. But this just seemed to be like, as beat up as this whole team has been, especially on the offensive side, but just kind of maybe the trend line kept going up and up and kind of almost in defiance of logic, just in terms of the depth and personnel. But it seemed like, you're finally facing a team that, I think with the culture in place, even with their own injury issues, just was able to say, not so fast, Young Devils. But I don't know. It was head scratching in terms of just how thorough this beating was, because this was kind of running counter to the competitive team that we had seen. Even like ASU, I don't think at any point has been, in terms of the healthy bodies available, the more talented team, basically since week 2. So to see but they've been competitive. Even the Fresno State game, 8 turnovers by the offense, but the defense was excellent. This just, everything fell apart. And so you wonder if just like, this is a team that was trying to, hold back the onslaught, keep the dam together as long as they could, and they got basically through 9 weeks, and just like it all came apart.
A lot of things in college sports, college football, don't make a heck of a lot of sense. But man, I mean, how can you play on the road in Seattle against Washington, a team that still very well could very likely go to the college football playoff, that still very well might have the Heisman Trophy winner? How do you have the game that you have defensively against the Huskies to where you're in control of the game going into the fourth quarter and you lose fairly narrowly? How do you have that happen? And then 2 weeks later, once again on the road, do what ASU did? I don't get it. I mean, I know that in a season like this and with all the extenuating circumstances and the peripheral things that are going on with this football program, and the knowns and the unknowns, it's probably a lot easier than it otherwise would be for things to really tip into the wrong direction. So I feel for the coaches. I feel for the athletes. It's got to be a difficult time to keep things on a stable plane, because, I mean, it all seems like it's just held together to where, like, it just barely, like a firm gust of wind can come through and blow the whole thing away. But it's tough. And like you said, these things happen to where sometimes just the tipping point pushes things in such a polar opposite direction than you think, that even though it doesn't make sense, there is some sense to it. I just cannot wrap my head around how ASU looks so great defensively just 2 weeks ago against a significantly better offense, one of the best offenses in college football, and then goes out and drops the dud that they did in Salt Lake.
Yeah, so we'll break down the upcoming opponent, UCLA, and how ASU matches up with them, and if there's a chance and a path towards redemption and getting back on that track that we saw them on the prior 5 weeks, in terms of just getting better and being feisty and being a tough out at least. But as we talk about this 52-point loss, basically on the other end of the spectrum is homefieldapparel.com. Just absolute greatness, nothing but bangers in their collection that includes over 175 schools, including, as we talked about each and every week, an amazing and gorgeous 25-piece ASU collection that now includes a really awesome bomber jacket, perfect for I guess Arizona's definition of winter. It's kind of light and medium weight, perfect for those 60-degree days that we're about to thankfully enjoy over the next several months. But of course, they have so much great premium licensed vintage collegiate apparel, incredibly comfortable shirts, hoodies, joggers, quarter zips, tank tops, and so much more. Just this week, they released a ton of new stuff for basketball season for a bunch of traditional Hoops powers. So if you got any Hoops Blue Blood fans on your holiday gift list, a lot of cool stuff there as well. If you want to get 15% off your first purchase, make those help your Christmas budget, just use SOTD23 at checkout at homefieldapparel.com. We're here to help. And so I encourage you all to support the good folks that support us at the good brand. SOTD23 gets you 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. So as we continue to turn the page from last week and looking forward to perhaps a brighter future, let's talk to a couple of the Sun Devils on the offensive side of ball that will be looking to rebound after Tuesday's practice, able to catch up with freshman running back Kyson Brown, who's been a key contributor and seen an increasing workload in recent weeks. Also a student at the Barrett Honors College as well. So I had a chance to talk with him about getting this offense back on track, the kind of balancing the life of a student athlete and facing the Bruin defense. So obviously, kind of a tough afternoon in Salt Lake City. When you look back on the tape, what are some of the things kind of jump out about, what led to some of the collective struggles of the offense?
I just feel like injuries. It's a lot of new things that they did that we weren't expecting. So that's a lot of things just tied into, and that was a really good football team. They played sound. Those guys were well prepared, and you can see it.
Yeah, what are some of the things that perhaps you were able to, or you employed, or some of the veterans, to try to kind of keep that frustration in check? Just obviously when things aren't working, but just not to get too down.
Yeah, a lot of guys we're just looking at next game, next play mentality, just working on getting better, being the best version of us that we can be, and just trying to get the next dub.
Looking ahead, what do you feel like the collective mentality is now? With that kind of looking forward, to UCLA. Just overall, it's kind of been a frustrating season. Some ups and downs, but just a couple weeks ago, you guys had a great showing on offense. What are the keys to kind of getting back to that success?
The guys. We've seen that how good we can be, how good our offense can be, how good our defense can be, like throughout the whole season. So it's just a matter of finding ourselves, and just a matter of coming back to the field, coming back to practice and working, just trying to be better, fixing the mistakes that we make, and just working on being the best version of us that we can be.
About 75% of the way through a freshman season, what's it just the kind of the experience and the kind of life as a student athlete been like for you?
I'm just learning. Everything's not going to go your way. Just learning how to adjust, learning new things, learning new plays, just learning new systems. So, as a freshman, I feel like, I've grown a lot from when I first came in here. So it's just a matter of just getting better every day.
And, of course, being a freshman, acclimating to the football side of things, but also, getting some recognition, on the scholastic side, the Barrett Honors College. What's it been like, just, kind of balancing those two worlds, the heavy football load, but also the heavy academic load?
I had to learn how to juggle those two fast, because being in honors is and being an athlete at the same time, it is kind of workload heavy. So you just got to find that good balance in time, and just really just about just time managing, and then just being more precise with what you do and how you use your time.
What kind of resources are in place with the team to kind of help guys like you, balance everything out, in the classroom and on the field?
The resources I use mostly is my mentor. She helps me organize my work, so I can see how much time a certain assignment may take me, and I can see how much time I have free time. So it's like she's one of the best resources that I have, because she looks out for me. She knows I play football, and she also helps me in a sense of just making sure I'm on top of my work.
You mentioned the Utah facing a great defense last week. Another great defense up ahead. What are the things that jumped out about what the Bruins like to do on that side of the ball?
Those guys are long, so we're preparing to pass and do everything, get our guys out in space and do whatever we need to do to have some explosive plays. But we noticed that they have a good front seven, so going into the week, we know we're going to have to hold up on the offensive line.
Kyson, this is kind of a big moment for you as a freshman, being able to play in the Rose Bowl for the first time. Does this mean anything a little bit more special, as much as every game's kind of the same for you guys?
Growing up, you know certain stadiums, and the Rose Bowl, has its history. So, it's going to be surreal playing in the Rose Bowl, but I'm just looking at it as another game, just trying to be the best version of myself I could be.
What has been the response like for you guys? Coach Dillingham said in his Monday presser that you guys are finally starting to get it, and finally starting to kind of figure out what the culture wants to be like here. What has been the response like after kind of taking a loss like that at Utah, but also coming back out here on a Tuesday?
We see, from a program like that, how he wants to model this program, and we see what needs to be done and how they responded versus their loss, and we want to do the same thing, respond after a tremendous loss like that. So we just want to imitate the same thing.
What has kind of been the attitude like in terms of you guys just needing to bounce back? I just talked to Coach Aguano, and he said this is another opportunity for you guys to, somewhat upset a team that's been playing really good football the last couple of weeks. But what has been the attitude like for you guys to bounce back as a team as a whole?
I mean, as a team as a whole, with the season that we're having, we're just having the attitude of fighting, just being a man and just, looking up and wanting to keep getting better. I mean, what else are you going to do? Nobody expects much. Nobody expects us to do anything. So the only way is up. The only thing we can do is get better. So,
what are kind of the emotions like in a game like that where, things are somewhat getting frustrating? I know people might be wanting more touches or just maybe when they do get their touches, maybe not getting the yards or somewhat the kind of the big plays that they want. But, what has it been like for you as a young player to kind of deal with some of those frustrations?
Yeah, of course it's rough, when you're used to, hitting off some runs and used to getting a certain amount of touches. But I look at it through a lens of just, waiting on my turn, being patient, understanding that everything has a process. So I'm not looking at it as a, more so selfish way, just learning from, other people's mistakes and trying to take that and build on my own game.
So we've talked in the past with you before that you guys went up to Cal. That was your first time in California.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be your second time, but now into LA. Is there somewhat kind of a fun spotlight that you feel? I know we kind of talked about the Rose Bowl already, but for you, first time to LA, is that fun at all?
I mean, I hear a lot about LA, and you see it in the movies and stuff. So I feel like it's going to be good for me to experience it and good to see, a little more part of the world. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's going to be another work day.
And one of the weapons that ASU has really had to do without up until last Saturday has been wide receiver Jordyn Tyson, who had a phenomenal debut season last year with Colorado before suffering a significant knee injury. It transferred to ASU over this offseason and is now looking to become a key part of the Sun Devil defense over the final 3 games. So I had a chance to talk with him about his rehab, what it meant to get back on the field, and why he became a Sun Devil.
All right, Jordan, so obviously a long road back. Just getting out there on Saturday, you had a target. What did it feel like just to be back on the field?
It felt good. Definitely a blessing, especially going through the things that came through these last months. Yeah, it was really good.
What was that process like? Obviously, not being able to be out there and contribute to a new place and just kind of going through that rehab process with your knee.
Very tough, very lonely, a lot of work, just every day coming in, trying to get better, get back to the person I was before.
Now, I've heard, a lot of the longer term injuries that sometimes the mental side is almost as difficult as the physical side. What was the kind of support system, your teammates, the program, coaches kind of gave to you on your road back?
It was definitely a lot. Definitely coming into this place, just definitely that family feeling, and even at my last place, it was still a family feeling, but being in transport, it was a lot of lonely time, just sitting in the bed, going to PT by myself, so I don't know. I get the best and the worst of things.
With now that you're back in there in the offense, what's it been like just kind of, ramping up these last couple of weeks, getting more involved and getting closer to playing?
It's been good. Definitely with what Coach Dillingham got cooked up. I like everything he's done with the offense, and just going to continue to grow as an offense.
Why was Arizona State the right place for you?
Just felt like the family. I knew Coach Samp from a while back. Coach Dillingham used to call me all the time when I was in the portal, FaceTime me, and it was always just good vibes, always happiness. So thought I could be here for real.
What's it been like, just now being a Sun Devil for the last several months? What's kind of the vibe like here in Tempe?
I love Tempe. It's that city life I was looking for. It's hot. It's not cold like it was in Colorado. So it's definitely 2 different things too, but I like it.
What kind of stands out about Coach Samp and everything that he's able to do and help guide the receiver room?
Coach Sam, he's a people's person. He understands everything all us receivers go through because he's been there. He's been a receiver. He's been recruited. He's done all this. So he just teaches me through personal experience, I feel like.
And so who are some of the guys in that receiver room along with you, maybe some of the vets that have helped kind of get you acclimated in the flow here?
I'm cool with all the receivers. All the receivers have been a cooler helping hand, especially learning offense, stuff like that. But, yeah, all of them.
When you look ahead for the last 3 games of the season, what are some of the things that you've really kind of set out for and that you want to get accomplished?
Just want to get out there, test the waters. Probably not playing too much, but yeah, just getting out there testing. So like next year, I can say I've been there and it hasn't been too long.
You mentioned maybe not playing too much. Are you kind of like on a so-called pitch count? Just a certain number.
Pitch count, play restriction. Yeah.
Okay. When you look at it for the remainder of your career, you kind of finishing this season on a high note. What are some of the things that you want to get done when in the maroon and gold?
Next year, going for everything. Win the Big 12 if we can. Over 1,000 yards if I can. I want everything, all of it.
Now, before we jump into our Know Your Enemy segment, bring your friends, bring your enemies, bring everyone you know, whether you like them or not, down to Cactus Sports, located at 514 South Mill Avenue in Tempe. Stock up on all the best Sun Devil gear that you can find, whether you're shopping for the cold winter months, whether you're shopping for the upcoming holidays, which would be a wise idea to get started on, whether you're looking ahead months down the road because it's going to get warm again here in Arizona in about 5 minutes. You can get everything you want to find that has maroon, gold, and all the colors of the Sun Devil rainbow, of course, once again, at Cactus Sports. They will help you put together the perfect Sun Devil fit from head to toe in just one stop. And at Cactus Sports, they are as passionate about making sure you look your Sun Devil best as they are about supporting the maroon and gold on game day. And if you can't make it to the Mill Avenue location, hop online, start putting together your ultimate Sun Devil gear wish list at cactussports.com. Go ahead, stock up, add up, get a big cart going. They offer free domestic ground shipping on orders over $75. So you can go ahead and splurge a little bit, save some money along the way. Follow them on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cactus Sports AZ. Cactus Sports, ASU alumni owned since 1992. Think local, buy local, be local.
All right, join the program now to give us a detailed look at UCLA is a friend of the program, Carlos, perhaps better known as Equity Bruin on Twitter, and also from, of course, the great No Truck Stops podcast. Carlos, how you doing today?
I am doing well. I'm excited to talk to you. It's finally that time of year where UCLA and Arizona State get ready for their annual game. Good to chat with you as always.
Yeah, it's kind of a little sadness to it, just kind of, at least for the foreseeable future, the final time these two teams will meet. But looking kind of in a large scale picture, first off, UCLA this season reached, as a top 20 team throughout the, at times in the AP poll, but 3 losses at this point, even 8 or 9 wins still seems within reach, at least from the outside. Overall, how do you think the season so far through 9 games has kind of panned out compared to preseason expectations?
I think the preseason expectations among UCLA fans was much higher than what has transpired before us. I think people sort of expected, and I think rightfully so, that UCLA probably could have been a very, very good team. I think people were sort of expecting 10 wins. And the reason being is that I think UCLA fans knew that this was going to be a defense with a ton of experience and a ton of production from last season. Even if the defense wasn't very good last year, the redeemable parts of that defense were intact, and that was their pass rush. They had brought in a new defensive coordinator, so there was a lot of hope there. And I think that part of the ball has kind of unfolded as we expected. It is, by all accounts, a top 10, top 15 level defense in the country. They have maybe the best pass rush in the country at this point, easily the best pass rush in the Pac-12. The secondary has even improved from being unwatchable trash to something that looks pretty competent, if not maybe super strong. But the defense has panned out and had lived up to expectations. And we'll get to the details, but the offense has sputtered beyond, I think, anyone's beyond everyone's imagination. I think no one expected the offense to tank the way that it has. And so here UCLA is sitting at 6-3 in almost exclusively due to their offensive struggles. I think people are upset. I think right now UCLA is at a moment where they might have taken a turn in the Chip Kelly era. I think more and more people have turned on him in terms of fans and important people potentially. I sort of wonder about where this kind of goes at this point. So I think this has been now officially with UCLA's loss last week can be classified as a disappointing season. I think I think the hopes were much higher, and they're staring down the barrel of an 8-win season and potentially worse.
Now that kind of leads perfectly into the next question. Talking about Chip Kelly, obviously a rough first couple of years, then seemed to be, picking up some traction, getting the program on that trajectory. But this season, as you mentioned, maybe falling a little bit short of the collective expectations. What's the overall feel in terms of Chip Kelly's kind of near future? Is there a path to kind of turn things around, or do you think that just perhaps the program has reached the ceiling that it can under him?
So the thing, I guess UCLA can absolutely salvage the season, and Chip Kelly can salvage a bit of his reputation if he wins the next 3 games, including this game against Arizona State. But I think fans are kind of tired of seeing UCLA beat down teams that they should, but lose to teams that are pretty good and have any sort of quality. I think the tenor around Chip Kelly has changed. I really get the sense that the thing is that UCLA set this up a couple of years ago with the way that they've decided to deal with his contract. His buyout, I think, if I read correctly, goes to about $4.5 million, drops down to $4.5 million, which is about a year after the season, after December 2023. And it goes to nothing after the following season. But they're not going to go into, I think it's pretty rare today to have your team go in with a coach that doesn't have an extension beyond that year. So they're going to have to figure out if they're going to extend him or not. And I think the tenor has changed, and UCLA is going to the Big Ten, and UCLA has looked disappointing in all of the ways that it has. I think it certainly feels like he's dug himself a bit of a hole here. Winning 3 straight, and depending on how those 3 straight unfold, would probably help, but it also would require UCLA to do things that it hasn't done this season. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the specifics and the details of that, but he's also sort of, the thing he was known for, his reputation, is as an offensive genius. And that part has completely fallen by the wayside. And that is in large part due to the recruiting and the roster building that he's done. This has been a complaint of Chip Kelly's, just at UCLA, but really going back to his time at Oregon, he is not someone who values or prioritizes recruiting the same way that some of the top coaches in college football do. And so what we're seeing now is kind of those things are coming to roost. The offensive line is bad. His quarterbacks, he's had probably the worst, most mismanaged season in terms of quarterbacks in his entire career. The tenor's changed. I think things are getting weird now. And I think this game against Arizona State, you're starting to hear rumblings from players that there's some unity issues. I think one of their defensive players said that they were disunified. The defensive player had said that they were disunified. They were struggling a lot with the offense. There were rumblings about skilled position players being unhappy. This is the most, I think, discordance that I've heard within UCLA's spaces among the players in a long time.
Now, let's talk about that offense. We'll get to perhaps the players here in a moment, but just kind of in a big picture view. Obviously, a powerful offense the last couple of years, but losing guys like DTR, Zach Charbonnet, obviously is gonna leave a bit of a dent. And you mentioned perhaps from a schematic standpoint, maybe this isn't the Chip Kelly that the reputation at least overall might indicate. What are the factors that you think have really kind of led to these overall offensive struggles in 2023?
I think the most foundational one is the roster. The offensive line, I think, has some real depth issues. It's had depth issues in the past, and they're just starting offensive linemen that, frankly, I think are probably great kids, but maybe are not top-tier Power 5 level players, or even mid-tier Power 5 level players. I think that is a part of it, and it's been an issue, right? Like, I think we have learned over the past 6 years with the transfer portal that you can't really reliably build a good offensive line through the transfer portal. And it's becoming more and more visible that DTR covered up a lot of the offensive line depth issues. He was a very smart player. He became a very smart player, really starting in midway through 2020 and then into 2021 and 2022, was able to mitigate a lot of those things. But now he's got a true freshman quarterback and a third-year player who hasn't really gotten a lot of run, right? He's got some inexperienced guys, and they're being asked to do a lot. I think just philosophically, those quarterbacks are being asked to do a lot behind a really bad offensive line. They're not quite – it's not the Chip Kelly of the old where I think he gave his quarterbacks easy stuff to do, especially in simple stuff to do, especially back in the day. I think the stuff that they're being asked to do is a lot more complex and requires a better offensive line than they have. So it's at once, I think, a roster issue where UCLA's offense is by nature limited in what they can do in the passing game, and schematic and philosophical in what he's being asked. On top of that, though, the offensive line, I think the quarterbacks are getting a lot of attention because of how visible they are as a position, but the running backs are struggling this season too. UCLA's production is fairly high, but its efficiency is low. I think among the lowest in the Chip Kelly era, really, since they kind of started going there in 2018, 2019. The running backs are not getting anywhere near the efficiency that they're getting. It feels like UCLA's running game is trying to beat teams 3-4 yards at a time. And that's not sustainable, especially when you don't have a great passing game. A lot of that has to do, again, with the offensive line. But the running backs, Zach Charbonnet might get 6 yards per carry with this offensive line. And these running backs are not bad, but they're not Zach Charbonnet. So I think it really starts in the trenches for UCLA in terms of what's wrong with their offense. It sort of cascades from there.
Now let's talk about the quarterbacks. It seems, as you mentioned, kind of maybe perhaps the most mismanaged of Kelly's tenure. Opening up with Ethan Garbers, going to the blue chip Dante Moore, then back to Garbers, and then both of those guys left injured last week against Arizona. What's the latest on the quarterback situation, and who might at this point get the starting nod against ASU?
Yeah, last I heard from the homie Ben Bolch at the LA Times, he mentioned that both are practicing now. So I don't know what that means. Chip Kelly will obviously be very close to keep it very close to his chest, but I imagine probably one of them at least will be available. And who knows beyond that? I think there was some talk that maybe Dante Moore or someone was in the concussion protocol, but it's all speculation. People are just sort of wondering. I don't think anyone really knows, but they were practicing. So I can't really say if I expect them to play. I'm not an insider. I'm sort of watching these things unfold. But I imagine one of them will be available. I'm also not sure how much it matters. Arizona State's defensive line has looked so much better over the past few weeks, and their pass rush has looked much better over the past few weeks that may not matter who's behind there. They may be in a similar situation to Arizona State's quarterback.
Obviously, whether it's Garbers or perhaps more, what are the what each of those guys brings to the offense in terms of their ability and the way they handle the offense.
Ethan Garbers, I think, is a more polished player at this point. He's not a polished player by any means, but I think he is much more decisive about whether he wants to run the ball or pass it. He still has some decision-making issues. He threw a couple of really bad passes last week and threw a really ill-advised pick while he was getting sacked. But his ability to move and run, I think, is miles ahead of Dante Moore. Dante Moore, I think what he gives you is he gives you a bit more of a downfield passing game. But he doesn't – he's a bit of a Michael Penix in that he's not going to really be able to scramble and create things with his legs. He's going to need time in the pocket to figure some stuff out, especially for a young quarterback like him. So right now he's limited in his ability to create things with his legs. I think that's sort of where it is. You've got one guy who's a mobile quarterback who's really limited in terms of his arm talent, who's going to be asked to do simple, more easy stuff in the passing game. And Dante Moore is a much younger player who is going to be asked to use his arm to kind of win UCLA games. If I were to guess, I'm pretty sure Ethan Garbers, as long as he's healthy, will be the one who's playing. So we'll see. I think it'll be interesting to see, how much time they split. If Ethan Garbers is available, if Dante Moore is available. Colin Schlee is also the third quarterback here, and he is getting playing time regardless of who starts as a sort of, kind of a guy who sort of runs the ball more than he passes. So he's gotten a few passes in.
Logan Loy and J. Michael Cernovin have been by far, the top two pass catchers and most involved. Which the listeners know about this receiving weapons at whichever quarterback ultimately gets a start.
Yeah, I think J. Michael Sturdivant has been, despite his production, I think really underutilized in this offense. He is a fast receiver. He was at Cal the year before and did fantastic there. I think he's a really interesting and intriguing pass catcher that I think because of the passing games and the passing game woes and the offensive line woes, hasn't really been given much of a shot. Logan Aloya, a totally reliable receiver. He's not ultra athletic. He's not J. Michael Sturdivant with his speed, but he's a reliable pass catcher. I think there's nothing wrong with him. I think they've got a whole other slew of pass catchers that I think are being underutilized in this too. I would say it hasn't really mattered because they're not really getting as much run as they could with a better quarterback. So yeah, those are great players, but there's just so many foundational issues with how the passing game is going that it's kind of tough to evaluate them right now. And I think they might be feeling some frustration themselves. I can imagine, being that caliber of a player, especially for J. Michael Sturdivant, and not being able to use as much as he could be in the passing game because it's so broken.
You mentioned the running game has had some perhaps efficiency issues, even though, just maybe a glance at the box score might say that, the duo of Carson Steele and TJ Harden are having, an effective season. What should ASU's defense maybe kind of expect from the Bruins ground game? And perhaps would that change depending on who's behind center?
I think they'll probably expect the same stuff we've seen from Chubb Kelly over the years, except that it's not working. I sort of think, they're going to lean heavily on Carson Steele, and they're going to try to get some stuff going up in the middle. But I don't ASU's defensive line, I think early on I've had many questions about it, but it's certainly good enough to be able to limit what UCLA does on the ground. I think Carson Steele is someone who is he's a good player, but he's a step slow. His first step is pretty slow. Now, look, I always have to caveat this with my first step, which is a walk. But he's a step slow, and I think that enables defenders to kind of get in touch with him a lot sooner than I think some other running backs in the Pac-12 by comparison. And I think it's sort of a tough situation if you're UCLA to have that because Carson Steele isn't breaking tackles at the rate that he was at Ball State. I think when he first came to UCLA, the analytics on Carson Steele were that he's led the country in the yards after contact. And that was something he did well. I think it's not quite translating the way UCLA had hoped, the way Carson Steele had hoped, coming into this game against UCLA. TJ Harden has a much quicker first step. He's more underutilized than Steele is. TJ Harden is another good player, but I also think that he's getting hit behind, and you can't do much when you're hit behind the line of scrimmage. I think is what's happening with UCLA's offensive line. So I think you can expect those guys to get a lot of run. UCLA will certainly lean on them, but I'd be really curious to see what this matchup looks like against maybe a slightly under-talented but very confident Arizona State defensive line.
Now, as you mentioned, kind of it's a little unusual now that this is more of a defensive-focused team, and Kenny Dillingham all week has been effusive in his praise of this Bruin front on the defensive side of the ball. What has new DC D'Anton Lynn been able to do to kind of make such a formidable unit in year one?
I think part of it has been his ability to draw up pass rushes that are confusing opposing offenses. I think that was something that UCLA had done in the past, but I think teams kind of figured them out. I sort of distinctly remember early on in previous seasons, UCLA was throwing a lot of looks, especially at pass rush at defending teams, at opposing offenses. And at some point, they sort of lost their ability to do that. Teams were kind of figuring them out. That's not quite happening. That and the fact that, D'Anton Lynn has, inherited a really good roster defensively. Leatu Latu obviously is probably the front runner for Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year at this point. I'm not sure he's quite locked it up, but he's very close. And he comes back after having a really great year last year. Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, fantastic pass rushers themselves. Jay Toya has stepped in at defensive tackle, has done a great job there. So they have, I think the thing about them is that they've they've just got a lot of pass rushing talent. A good front generally. Those linebackers, Darius Musow, I think has improved. I think he got some criticism last season from UCLA fans, but I think he's a better player now. They've got just a ton of experience, a ton of cohesion. They're really together. We'll see how together they are. You could sort of tell that they were getting frustrated by UCLA's offensive woes. It's really interesting to hear players kind of confirm that. So we'll see how it holds up now. I think this Arizona State game is a bit of a test to see whether these players are going to stay motivated. UCLA is on quit watch to me, frankly. And this might be a game where they just might quit against an ASU team that, has nothing to play for and everything to play for at the same time. It's going to be interesting to see how the defense holds up there. But the pass rush is what I would say is the thing that's holding them up.
Obviously, the pass rush, as you mentioned, is elite, and they've been pretty good overall over the course of the season against the run. What kind of game plan do you think an offense should draw up to attack this Bruin defense?
My brain is a little bit too wrapped up in what I know Arizona State is at this point. I struggle to figure out what that might look like. I think the offensive, I think it's got to be screen passes, stuff to the outside, real quick, just as any Arizona State offensive game plan should probably focus on now, with the number of offensive linemen that are hurt, with the number of quarterbacks that are hurt at this point. I don't know what the status is on Trenton Bourguet, but if it's Trenton Bourguet or Jacob Conover, that should probably be the game plan, just to get it out of the backfield as quickly as possible. I'm not sure that UCLA is unexploitable up the middle. I'd like to see Cameron Scatterbo probably get between the tackles and see what he does, but I think it's going to have to be a lot of stuff on the outside. I think this game is going to be, it's going to be one defensively for either team. I think the defenses for both of these teams is very good. Offensively, I'm not really sure what Arizona State's options are. It looks sometimes like they can figure something out. It's been super variable, super up and down. The paths forward for Arizona State's offense are very unclear to me. So I can't think about the game plan that Arizona State should employ without thinking about the limitations they have.
Yeah. So obviously, there's some guys that the ASUs are certainly on ASU's radar. Like Latu and that caliber. But who are some guys, maybe some X factor types, under the radar type Bruin players that you think could ultimately play a big role in determining Saturday's outcome?
I think Kane Medrano is an interesting player. I think he has had a really good year. I would probably go as far to say maybe a bit of a breakout year. I think he is a name that doesn't quite come up because he's not getting 12 sacks the way that Leatu Latu is piling up right now. But he's a good player. I think he's smart. He knows where he needs to be. I rarely see him out of position. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he does in this game, especially because I think it's going to be a pretty heavy, I think, Scatterbo night against UCLA. So probably him. Offensively, X factors there. I think probably it's going to be Keegan Jones, although I don't know. Keegan Jones is another sort of slot receiver. I actually don't even know. I haven't seen him in a minute. Maybe he's hurt. I have no idea. But if he plays and he's there, I would be pleasantly surprised. He's a really, really fast player, but doesn't quite get utilized. Someone's gonna tell me, he's been hurt for 4 weeks, and I'm be like, oh, okay, cool. Didn't know that. But I can't really tell because Chip Kelly doesn't always use them. So offensively, I don't know. We have kind of gone through the list of players there, and nothing has quite worked for UCLA offensively this season. I think if anyone who's sort of thinking and hearing all this conversation about UCLA's offense looks at something like SP Plus and says, oh, wow, UCLA has the number 28th offense in the country, it can't be that bad. People probably should know SP Plus is no longer dropping preseason projections from their metrics, and so best to kind of use some other analytic systems to understand what UCLA's offense is, because it's bottom third in the country at this point. So I can't tell you what the X factors are. I guess it's probably J. Michael Sturdivant, because if he gets the ball, I think he might be able to do some stuff with it. The problem is getting him the ball in the right position. So I'd say Cam Medrano on the defensive end, and I'll probably pass on the offensive end. I can't think of anything.
So, of course, after this season, these teams will be going their separate ways, ASU to the Big 12, and, of course, UCLA heading over to the Big 10. What's just kind of the overall feel around, kind of Bruin country about, this upcoming move to the Big 10?
I think generally among UCLA fans, it's positive. I think people are excited. I personally am not. I think it's a horrible move. I think in part because UCLA and Arizona State, though no one would say they're rivals, I think have a pretty contentious and fun history. This series has been, pretty competitive most years. I think we're probably going to get some blowouts on either ends of those things. But for a while there, UCLA and Arizona State were sort of Pac-12 South contenders back when divisions were a thing. They play every year. They both have generally been a similar caliber of program until very recently. So I think, fracturing connections like that, UCLA and Arizona State have had many battles in the past. I think that they have many recruiting battles, and there's all kinds of stuff wrapped up in there. So I think I'm going to be really sad for UCLA to not have to play Arizona State among the other teams that they're not going to play anymore. I don't think that these are the two teams that view themselves as rivals enough to say, hey, we've got to get, some sort of regular series, even if it's not annual. I'm not sure that that's in the cards. Not that they don't respect each other, but, Arizona State and UCLA will just not have many non-conference games to go with. So I'm personally upset about it. My thoughts, for anyone who follows me on Twitter, knows what my thoughts are. I think it's the degradation of the sport as we know it for lining up the pockets of TV execs and universities. It sort of feels like we're losing a lot. We're going to swap here. We're going to see UCLA swap Arizona State with, I don't know, Iowa, I guess, or whoever else, like a Rutgers or whoever the corollary for Arizona State would be in the Big Ten. And there's just no history there. We don't really have any memories of Jaden Daniels having a bit of a breakout game in 2021 or, Taylor Kelly or what's his name? Gosh, Mike Bercovici, right? Like all of those quarterbacks and ASU lore and all the great defensive players that have come through there and have taken UCLA to the woodshed and that UCLA had to beat, and we're just missing a lot of that. So I think I think UCLA fans generally are happy about it, but I think that's because American sports fans have decided that the thing that matters to them most is how much their team is making and not how much they actually enjoy watching the sport. So I'm sad about it, but hey, UCLA fans are happy. So I guess we'll see how much we get to enjoy this UCLA team moving forward.
And last one for you, of course, with the impending implosion of this conference and everybody's kind of scattering, going their separate ways, what does the future hold for no truck stops? As a lot of these schools are soon going to be frequenting truck stop regions.
Yeah, we're having conversations about that. We have every intention of figuring some things out in terms of what we're going to actually talk about. We've gone back and forth, and there's just so many interesting there. Even if the conferences themselves don't have a ton of history with some of these teams, from a Pac-12 perspective, there's a lot of interesting stuff to follow. How do UCLA, Oregon, Washington, and USC fare in a conference that is supposed to be better, and how will they deal with travel? But I actually think there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about with Utah, ASU, Arizona, and Colorado going to the Big 12. Less so Colorado because they have more of a history with some of those schools. But I actually think it's so fascinating to think about what Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State could be in a Big 12. In a Big 12 conference that I think is actually really interesting. I never thought I'd say that about the Big 12, but they've got a lot of really the Big 12 just feels like there's more cultural kinship with the Big 12 because they are a conference that will be seen at the margins. They will be underappreciated, undervalued, underrecognized, and the champion of that conference will not be valued the same way the champion of the Big 10 would be. So there's a lot of interesting stuff to talk about there. We're still talking about it now. I think the hard thing is that as we've learned, as people who are just kind of doing it as a hobby, covering 12 teams during non-conference season when you've got 12 games is really hard, and you just don't do it that well. And so trying to cover 12 teams that are likely going to be playing 12 different games. Maybe 10 to 12 different games on any given week would be hard. So we've got some stuff to figure out. We'll find out. We'll know more soon. We'll have an announcement soon.
Well, as always, great to catch up with you, Carlos. Encourage all our folks to give you a follow at Equity Bruin and give a listen to the No Truck Stops podcast. Again, thanks for the insights. Always appreciate it. And hopefully these two teams match up down the road.
I agree. Thank you for having me.
So we are hoping that the opposition doesn't feast on ASU like we saw last week in Salt Lake City. But you know what? If you're looking for a feast of your own, stop by any one of the Burrito Express locations to get some premier grub made for you by some die-hard Sun Devils. Of course, Burrito Express is a family-owned business that began in 1995 with a combination of authentic recipes, competitive prices, and a comfortable atmosphere. That all makes dining with Burrito Express a unique experience. You've seen their passion on Twitter. You've seen how incredibly active they are with supporting Sun Devil student-athletes with a multitude of NIL deals that they've put together. It's safe to say if you are part of the Sun Devil family, Burrito Express is a business well worth your support. And by the way, the food, top tier all the way. Burrito Express has 6 Valley locations, 2 in Gilbert, 1 in Mesa, 1 in Chandler, 1 in Scottsdale, and that Tempe location near Rural and University, just about a half mile from Mountain America Stadium. They're open from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. Monday through Friday, while some locations are open as early as 6 a.m. during the week and 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. You can order online at theburritoexpress.com for pickup or delivery. Be sure to also give them a follow on Twitter and Instagram at BurritoEXP and on TikTok at BurritoExpressAZ. So now we will take a look at the UCLA Bruins for yet another stop along this farewell tour that ASU is making up and down the Pac-12 conference. And, you know, when it comes to Pac-12 venues, or I mean even venues across the college football world, across the sports world, they don't get more significant, more remarkable, and memorable than the Rose Bowl. I mean, that is pretty much college football defined, whether it's the Rose Bowl game that happens on or around New Year's Day or the Rose Bowl facility, of course, where UCLA plays its home games. Some memorable moments for ASU, both in terms of great memories like clinching the South Division in 2013 or some absolute heartbreakers like you saw maybe in 2011, the Campbell Lodge scrum that happened in 2015. The list goes on. This matchup with UCLA is one that's brought about some highs and some lows, and this is at least the final installment for now, at least, as ASU travels to the Rose Bowl this weekend.
Yeah, it's just, again, kind of bittersweet. Like, you're not going to be able to get to the Rose Bowl on a regular basis, or Husky Stadium, or some of these other cool places. And you know, obviously the historical significance in the game for that building is probably unmatched. But also, as you mentioned, Joe, a lot of good memories there. You know, it was my first one, even though it might not be, it's probably the most significant. I don't know, maybe it will. But the kind of trick play with Jake getting the bad pass from J.R. Redmond that Jake says, you know, being a little underthrown saved his life as he scored the touchdown. And then on the bus as they were leaving the stadium, he turned to the team and told them they're going to be back in that building. And well, Jake was right. So it's going to be sad. It's kind of the last time. I mean, maybe they have a non-con scheduling agreement down the road. That'd be great to see. But maybe some in this expanded playoff things can get weird. But gonna miss that building. You know, so Saturday covering that game there, and it's weirdly located press box. Could be a little bittersweet.
So of course UCLA is led by Chip Kelly in year 6 with the Bruins. It took a while to get things going. For those first few years, they could barely get past like a 4-win mark, which was just really weird because it seemed to make all the sense in the world that Kelly was going to come in, hit the ground running. Of course, he had incredible years up at Oregon, a lot of success in the NFL. Things have turned around, 17 wins combined over the 2021 and 22 seasons. Quite a bit of roster turnover with the likes of DTR, Zach Charbonnet gone from the roster last year, but they've put together a successful season in a very different way from what you're used to out of Chip Kelly. They're 6-3 right now. They got inside the top 20 at an early point in the season, like a lot of Pac-12 teams. I mean, there was that stretch of time where I think there were, like 5 or 6 ranked teams at once. So things have leveled out. It is the Pac-12 in its final year, so there are teams that are kind of cannibalizing each other here and there. But, again, a 6-3 team as it is right now. After this week, they play USC, which is basically in a free-for-all, and then Cal. So getting to 8 or even 9 regular season wins is something that still is very plausible for this Bruin team.
Yeah, and you heard Carlos kind of talk about maybe that was a little disappointing, kind of given their expectations. Now, whether those expectations were warranted by the overall fan base remains to be seen. They've had an interesting kind of up and down season in terms of being that surge, but then getting embarrassed last week by the resurgent U of A Wildcat team, dropping from the rankings of the AP. But this is a team that still has some good stuff to play for, and it's going to be interesting to track just kind of how the LA schools, and especially I think UCLA, are going to handle this kind of the end of this year and also kind of the early transition into the Big Ten.
So talking about some of the personnel for UCLA, starting with the quarterback position, and just like ASU, some potential injury issues there, as they've had a couple guys that have seen quite a bit of action this year, and they both have had major injury issues as a result of that game against Arizona last week. Dante Moore, a big-time true freshman, bit of a storyline there. He was all set to go to Oregon, and then he decommitted from the Ducks and signed with UCLA. The main reason there is because of his relationship with Kenny Dillingham. So when KD made his way to ASU, Moore switched his commitment, and now he's pretty much the top quarterback for the Bruins. On the year, he's played in 8 games, has 1,344 passing yards, 10 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. So some growing pains, some bumps and bruises there, and specifically of recent note, some medical issues that we're still kind of waiting to see how that's going to shake out with his availability for Saturday. Also on that list is Ethan Garbers, who's appeared in 7 games, 786 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So, again, we're not seeing the superstar performances at the quarterback position this year like we saw with the likes of DTR, Brett Hundley, and those others. So, a big question mark for the Bruin offense is what's going to be the case at quarterback. If they can't have either, then it might go down to Colin Schlee, who came over. He started a handful of games at Kent State. Hasn't done much as a passer, but he's one of the team's leading rushers this season. So, kind of beats me for the time being. It's still early in the week. We will see what Saturday brings, but ASU is certainly not the only team in this matchup this weekend with some major quarterback issues when it comes to both performance and health.
It's been really interesting to see how UCLA's handled the quarterbacks. Ethan Garber's getting the start. I know there's a lot of fans initially that wanted the 5-star blue chip freshman Dante Moore to get the start. Garber's got the start of the year, but then gave way to Moore. And as you mentioned, Joe, a lot of growing pains. Explosive athlete, exciting, but just obviously a lot of freshman moments in terms of being able to handle the passing game side of things. So Chip went back to Ethan Garbers, and he was now kind of entrenched there as the starter. And I believe he's a former 4-star in his own right. He's certainly no scrub, but playing behind that porous offensive line that we'll probably talk about here in a second. Garbers went down hurt against U of A, and then Dante Moore after him also went down. And Colin Schlee, you mentioned, just principally as a kind of a gimmick run package type of quarterback, and when he's throwing the ball, not a whole lot of success as well. They also have Justin Martin, a former 4-star, a redshirt freshman on the depth chart as well. But with the top 2 guys and Garbers and Moore injured or having left injured, we'll see exactly what transpires throughout the week, because there's kind of a profile with Garbers being the more polished passer and more of a threat at this point with his legs. Schlee obviously falling in that latter category as well.
So on the ground, they had what was believed to be a very big pickup in the transfer portal, and Carson Steele coming over from Ball State. I believe he ran for over 1,500 yards last year in the MAC. Having a solid season, 712 net rushing yards, about 5.5 yards per carry. That's real good. 6 rushing touchdowns. He could get to the 1,000-yard mark, just depending on what goes on through the remainder of the season. So a very good season for him, not necessarily on par with what he did in the MAC, but still doing well, leading the way for the UCLA run game. TJ Harden, 496 net yards, a little over 5 yards a carry in his own right. So both the top 2 backs are averaging over 5 yards a touch, 5 touchdowns for him. And as you mentioned with Schlee, He has 247 net rushing yards, 3 touchdowns. He's averaging almost 12 yards a carry. He's got 21 carries in 5 games, so we'll see what that brings, and if they're going to get a little weird with it, he might be a guy that touches the ball quite a bit. But they have some names out there on the ground that can get it done. In the pass game, Logan Loya's the main target there, 37 catches, 463 yards with 3 touchdowns. J. Michael Sturdivant, he came over from Cal, 27 catches, 424 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Maliki Matavau at tight end. UCLA's done a really good job in recent years at the tight end position. 8 receptions, 203 yards. He's averaging over 25 yards a reception at tight end, 2 touchdowns in his own right. So as far as the offensive skill players and the offense as a whole, again, a departure from what you're used to because they've had some high-profile, highly potent skill players, but they still have some guys that can get it done.
Yeah, and I think you start with any Chip Kelly offense with the run game, and with Steele and Harden are, a nice combo there, with Harden being the more explosive of the two, and Steele having the kind of the long flowing blonde locks, and I believe he has a pet gator that's gotten him some attraction, made him a fan favorite early on. But just not seeing the explosiveness in the run game that we've seen in recent years with some of the real exciting players that the Bruins have had in that backfield. Then you go to the pass game. Now we don't know who the quarterback is, and if it is Garbers, it might be a little bit more effective with a guy who can really kind of stretch a defense like J. Michael Sturdivant with that size, but also that explosive speed. Kyle Ford has that size as well. But I think it's all going to start up front with the offensive line. Their offensive line has struggled, especially in pass protection, but also not having blown open the holes. And ASU, of course, as we talked about, big time humbling last week. Are they going to be able to rebound? And with the ASU front, the defensive line and the linebackers, are they going to be able to kind of withstand that run first Chip Kelly offense? And obviously, always seems to have some new wrinkles in terms of just what he runs. He might be running the same concepts, but Chip's always keeping things interesting. ASU's the defensive front's got to be real disciplined on Saturday.
Yeah, it's really odd in a sense about that Bruin offensive line because they have had the same 5 starters in every single game this year. And you look at that and you think that would be a strength of the team if you got, the exact same left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle. But that's not always meant to be in that regard. As we switch over to defense, this could possibly be the best Bruin defense that I can certainly remember, at least if you look at the statistics about it. UCLA ranks 2nd nationally in run defense, 2nd in team sacks, 3rd in tackles for loss, 13th in the nation in total defense. They have only allowed 1 rushing touchdown through 9 games. They are just absolutely getting it done on defense. Again, a very different, philosophy, approach, level of execution, because you're used to Chip Kelly and it's going to be this fast break, nonstop offense. And then maybe some defense that can play a little bit of ball, but just a high-scoring offense that you can blow teams out of the water. This is a totally different deal to where you've got an offense that's sputtering, but a defense that is quite possibly the best in the conference, which is a very intimidating thing to say, and it's true, especially after what we saw last week from Utah.
The strength is absolutely up front, and Kenny Dillingham has been just truly just kind of overflowing with praise for this defense, saying it is the best defensive front he has seen in his 2 years since he's returned to the Pac-12 conference. And, the first-year defensive coordinator, Danton Lynn, just 34 years old. He came over from the Baltimore Ravens, and, man, he has been able to really just light some out. And he had the benefit of having some extremely talented players to work with in his 4-3 scheme. He's a guy that, kind of like Brian Ward, likes to move guys around a lot, uses a lot of blitzes and really kind of brings a lot of chaos. But just when you have a building block of Leotu Latu, absolute stud, former or a future first rounder, 11 sacks, 16 TFLs on the year. You have the Murphy twins and Gabriel and Grayson coming off those 3 edges right there, let alone before any of the other guys we talk about. Just, that's that trio of Latu and the Murphys, so good and so disruptive. And when you have a young coordinator who's inventive in terms of his schemes and his philosophy, it just is really, as Joe alluded to, the numbers speak for themselves. But just, they had a rough go last week against Arizona a little bit, at least comparatively, especially on 3rd down. But just when you take the body of work from what we've seen in recent years, just a real interesting kind of turnaround defensively for the Bruins.
Yeah, Latu is just an absolute beast off the edge. 16 tackles for loss, 11 sacks on the year, 2 forced fumbles. It's very likely, at least in my opinion, between him and Ellis from Utah, kind of neck and neck for that Pac-12 Pat Tillman Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, these guys are just crushing their opposition. And as you mentioned, the Murphy brothers, they're getting it done as well. And it's not just in the defensive front, although that's certainly the strength. Alex Johnson, the secondary, has 4 interceptions, one of the tops in the nation. They've got some linebackers that may not be household names, but are also getting it done. Darius Musau, Kane Medrano, to name a few at the top of the list in terms of tackles on the team. You know, you got a guy like Kenny Churchwell from the Phoenix area who's playing quite a bit in the secondary. So, you know, once again, I know it's kind of that lack of household name thing, I think, is a lot easier these days because with all the transfers, you know, you just have these players that you're not used to seeing come up through the ranks and play 2, 3, 4 years at their team in this conference. So it's always that moving pieces element to where it's kind of hard to get used to some of the names. But a guy like Latu, he's someone that's been a known commodity for a bit. As you mentioned, he's going to make a lot of money to play football here in the very, very near future. So they've got – this isn't a one-man show. They've got a multitude of options that can rush the quarterback, guys that can make stops in space, guys that can defend the pass. You know, they're not quite as good against the pass as they are, you know, rushing the passer or stopping the run. But when you're doing things the way that they are, you don't have to be perfect at everything. They are definitely making teams pay, making teams suffer. And just with ASU's offensive line in the shape that it is, the quarterback position in the shape that it is, I am sure that those rushers for UCLA are just licking their chops at what they can possibly do against ASU this weekend.
Yeah, so I think like the tight ends, the backs are all going to play a big part in pass protection in terms of, you know, when ASU is going to probably have to, you know, throw the ball and pass it around. And I do think that while the UCLA pass defense is much better in terms of at least the secondary talent and the secondary performance, at least compared to what we've seen in recent years, maybe the last 2-3 years, you know, in Pasadena, you know, obviously having that pass rush makes any you know, covers up for a lot of the maybe deficiencies or issues in the secondary. Not to say that necessarily they're as glaring as they were, but there are some opportunities there. So it's going to be real interesting to see exactly what Bo Baldwin, the offensive coordinator, and of course, you know, Kenny Dillingham now with the play is the principal play caller, what those offensive minds are able to do in terms of just whatever quarterback is back there for the Sun Devils to give them time enough, because, you know, ASU of course does have some good weapons. Jalen Conyers still exists. Elijah Badger still exists. Troy O'Meary has emerged in recent weeks. Melquan Stovall. There's some plays to be made, but if you don't have the time, if you're getting, you know, if your tackles are just, you know, kind of folding pretty quick, you know, it's going to be a real, could be a long night, or perhaps, you know, this is a chance to kind of, you know, shock the world a little bit, and if they're able to just give them a little bit of time.
And before we jump into our keys and our predictions on how this game will shake out, a key to you being a Sun Devil fan is being a member, a subscriber of DevilsDigest.com. As I'm sure you know by now, by being such a subscriber, you will get premium content across the Rivals.com network. So what does that do? That gives you the opportunity to learn about other teams that ASU may or may not be playing on the football field, other teams in the game of basketball. And, oh, by the way, that Sun Devil Hoops season starting this week, so we're getting that crossover territory where you're going to get a lot of coverage, a lot of content on Devil's Digest, not only focusing on this football season, but basketball coming up. The football offseason, when that comes about here in a few weeks, we know, we learned this last year, it never slows down, it never ends. So there's always a good time, never a bad time to be a member of the huddle on DevilsDigest.com. So if you aren't a subscriber, even if things aren't going exactly as I'm sure you'd like for them to go with Sun Devil football, a lot of important conversations that are happening, a lot of information is being shared, and you get the suspicion that things are only going to ramp up when it comes to newsworthy items in the off season. So to get all that, you got to be a member of the huddle on DevilsDigest.com.
All right, Joe, let's start off with some keys to victory. My number one, pretty obvious. Keep whatever quarterback, whether it's Bourget, Conover, someone else, just keep them upright. Give them a chance to get to throw the ball. I mean, it's whether it's, you know, some quick passes, relying on that screen game, or we getting some more creative issues, or helping your tackles or in the interior in terms of pass pro and keeping those tight ends in, having the running back step up and take on those blitzers. you got to give them time. You got to keep them upright because this is truly one of the elite pass rushing teams in the country.
And I'm just going to double down on that. I mean, you got to find a way to block. You really got to bring the pride, bring the grit into it. I know this is a beleaguered offensive line. I know that they're disadvantaged in several ways, and the icing on the cake in a very sarcastic way is having one of the longer tenured offensive linemen decide to quit the team recently. So things are not necessarily working in their favor, but this is just a game where you have to find some way to band it together, because if you don't, UCLA is going to tee off on you. And as we've seen not just last week but throughout the year, that doesn't just result in loss of yardage, change of possession. You can get guys hurt. So this needs to become a pride issue, an execution issue, where ASU is just going to draw a line in the sand and find some way to slow down the Bruin pass rush.
Key number 2, kind of flipping that script, exploit their own offensive line struggles with your own pass rush. BJ Green, Clayton Smith, looking at you guys. Brian Ward obviously is not pleased with what happened with his defense a week ago. Would like to see him kind of scheme up with a little bit of chip on his shoulder. Bring that chaos, bring the creativity, bring the pressure, whether it's Garbers, Moore, Schlee, Martin, whoever. Turn that around on them. Bring the pass rush, disrupt them, force them into some critical mistakes.
And as a component of that, again, just kind of piggybacking off that, is forcing turnovers. With ASU's offense in the shape that it is, and with the very concerning prospect of having to face the UCLA defense, the Devils have to steal some possessions. They have to steal some field position, because it doesn't make a lot of sense for ASU to have to go 75, 80 yards routinely to try to score points. That just is not a winning proposition against a defense like UCLA's. So they're going to have to get in there and force some turnovers, and the UCLA quarterbacks have turned the ball over a little bit. And if you get to the point to where if guys are still banged up, or if you're having to go further down the depth chart, that creates some possibilities there. So ASU's defense needs to be as opportunistic as possible. I think they need to attack, and you just need to focus and hone in on trying to strip the ball, trying to tip the ball, trying to pick it, whatever it takes to get that ball in your hands. ASU needs to acquire possessions by way of turnovers.
All right, my final key, and obviously ASU losing by 52, you're humbled, you're embarrassed. I want to see them put that all behind, focus on the next game, come out, play with confidence, and hit UCLA early, because the Bruins are a bit of slow starters. They have gone scoreless in 5 of the 6 first quarters of Pac-12 matchups. So there's an opportunity there. I want to see the defense just kind of get after them early, and the offense get some points early. Just whether it's a field goal or 2, or let it, you can punch it in for the end zone. Just hit them early. Show that you're able to shake off last week, that there's no hangover effect, and that you're going to make this a ball game and make them fight for 60 minutes.
My third and final one is, and this is probably going to happen by necessity, but continue to get a little weird. Continue to try to have some fun. I mean, we're really scraping the bottom of the barrel as far as redeeming qualities of this 2023 season. So you got to try to catch lightning in the bottle when you can, and just have some entertainment value about it. Kind of throw caution to the wind. And I know that that's happened this season, and it's backfired a lot. I know that it's happened this season and been successful a fair amount of occasions. In a game like this, just kind of like we saw last week, where they're just trying to scrounge anything they possibly can out of the offense. Get weird, do odd things, just go down with the ship. Don't go down easy. You don't want status quo, because you've seen games where it's just like, man, they aren't even, maybe not necessarily this season, but yeah, I've seen it in the past where it's, man, like they are just not even putting up a fight. They're not even really trying out there. You've seen that in the past. So, again, if you're going to go down swinging, but also give yourself a fighting chance to maybe pull out a big upset.
All right, so now we're going to lay out how we see Saturday night going down in Pasadena, and I think it's going to be kind of a similar game, or maybe what we should have seen last week in terms of 2 struggling offenses going up against 2 formidable defenses. I think it's going to be ugly. I think there's going to be a lack of big plays. I think there might be a key turnover, but I do think that UCLA is a little bit at this point deeper and has some, I think the battle of strengths with defense and defense. UCLA has the edge there, and I do think that, based on what we've seen so far, they also have the edge offensively. I think ASU is going to have a real tough time getting, as you mentioned, Joe, kind of driving the length of the field. without the help of maybe some big-time special teams or defensive plays as well. I do think that the defense will rebound from a humbling loss with a much better game, but just not enough. And I think ASU is going to have to probably settle for some field goals because I just don't think that they're going to be able to, again, finish drives. So ultimately, I think UCLA holds on for a 26-16 win.
To me, it's fairly simple in nature. The matchup of UCLA's defense against ASU's offense is very, very, very concerning to me, and I think that that's going to provide far too many dividends for the Bruins. You might have some turnovers that either result in short fields or ones that are pick sixes, fumble recoveries for touchdowns, things like that. It's an opportunistic defense that UCLA has, and I see them capitalizing on that, even if their offense isn't able to generate much, which I don't necessarily think that they will. I mean, I certainly don't see them doing anything close to what Utah did last week, but then again, certainly didn't expect Utah to do what Utah did last week. I think, as you mentioned, I'd be shocked if ASU doesn't have a drastically improved defensive performance, but I think it's going to be the Sun Devil offense that not only keeps ASU out of this game, but makes the offensive effort for UCLA look a little bit better because of the opportunities I'm concerned that the Sun Devil offense will provide to the Bruin defense. So what that all adds up to when you pile it together is a more competitive game, but still one where the Sun Devil offense just is not able to do nearly enough to stay in it or have a chance to win the ball game. I'm calling a 24-10 UCLA victory.
And that's going to do it for this episode of Speak of the Devils. I'd like to thank our guest, ASU running back Kyson Brown, wide receiver Jordyn Tyson, and Carlos, a.k.a. Equity Bruin, of the No Truck Stops podcast. This week's game will kick off in Pasadena at 7 p.m. with TV on the Pac-12 network. If you're not making it out there, tune in if you can. Support your Sun Devils because hopefully we will see a more competitive effort. In the meantime, stay with us on the social media side. You can follow the show on Twitter at SOTD Podcast, on Instagram at Speak of the Devils. We're on YouTube. We are on Facebook, and can give me a follow on all the things social at BDenny29.
So this could, I know it's not determined, but it would make sense if this is the last ASU football game on the Pac-12 network. Right?
Really? Okay, yeah.
With Oregon and Arizona, like those seem like they would have, again, I'm not placing any guarantees, but it just seems likely that those will be on national TV. When you have, a team that's fighting for a playoff position and then a really bitter rivalry game. We'll see. Obviously, we won't know this all for a few weeks, but that would be a farewell we're all ready to have. But back to the point of things, you can follow me on all the stuff for wonderful takes like what I just gave you at Joe Healey 42. And a huge thank you to all of our wonderful sponsors, of course, including Sun Devil Family Charities, a 501c3 nonprofit organization created primarily for the purpose of raising funds to provide financial assistance to Arizona State University alumni, students, staff, and immediate family members adversely affected by medical issues. Monetary donations are always appreciated and support those in need due to unexpected medical conditions, and they also have volunteer and sponsorship opportunities available that you can learn about on their website. And to learn more about Sun Devil Family Charities and other ways to support them, check them out online at sundevilfamily.org. Also, be sure to follow them on Instagram at sundevilfam and on Twitter at sundevil_family.
Once you're done supporting our amazing sponsors, be sure to drop a 5-star review on the podcast platform of your choice. Joe and I will be back next week as we break down what happened in Pasadena and look ahead to a visit from the Ducks.